You ever buy something thinking it's going to bring you peace, only to realize it's the start of your biggest nightmare? That was me last year. My name's Ethan Ward, and after 15 years of working double shifts as an engineer, saving every spare cent, I finally bought the kind of home I used to drive by and dream about. Not a mansion, just a nice 2-story brick house in a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by green lawns and polite smiles. The kind of place where kids rode bikes in circles, and everyone's mailbox looked exactly the same. It was peaceful, clean, and quiet. Maybe too quiet. The kind of quiet that hides rules you don't notice until they choke you. At first, I loved everything about it. The trimmed hedges, the white fences, the smell of fresh-cut grass in the mornings. After years of living in the city, waking up to birds instead of sirens felt like a blessing. But what I didn't know was that I had just moved into the kingdom of the HOA, the Homeowners Association, ruled by one woman who treated every inch of the neighborhood like her private empire. Her name was Martha Gillian. Though everyone called her Mad Martha behind her back, you could spot Martha from half a block away. She was the one with a clipboard instead of a purse, always walking her dog, always watching. She didn't talk much, but she wrote a lot, mostly fines, warnings, and reminders that you weren't following her rules. My first encounter with her happened the very first week. I was repainting my mailbox. Nothing fancy, just a simple dark gray. I remember feeling proud, standing there with a brush in hand, finally taking care of something that was truly mine. Then a shadow crossed the pavement. "You can't use that color," a voice said. I turned, and there she was, Martha, dressed like she was heading to a board meeting, holding a tiny dog that looked meaner than she did. "I'm sorry," I said. "The mailbox," she repeated, pointing her pen at it like a weapon. "It's not on the approved color list. You'll need to repaint it white by the end of the week, or I'll have to file a violation report." I blinked, trying not to laugh. "It's just a mailbox." Her eyes didn't move. "Rules are rules, Mr. Ward." That was my first fine, $25 for unapproved aesthetic modification. I should have known then what kind of nightmare I'd walked into. For the next few months, it was one thing after another. A notice because my trash can was visible from the street on collection day. A warning because my grass was half an inch above standard height. I thought it was petty until they fined me $150 for leaving my car parked on the street overnight. That's when I started realizing this wasn't about keeping the neighborhood nice. It was about control. Martha wasn't just enforcing rules. She was feeding on them. I started talking to my neighbors, cautiously at first. Most of them were polite, but nervous. "Yeah," one man told me quietly, "we all hate it, but she's got connections on the board. If you fight her, she'll make your life miserable." So everyone just followed the rules, kept their heads down, and pretended it was normal to live under constant surveillance. But I wasn't built that way. I'd worked too hard, for too long, to let someone like Martha tell me what color my mailbox should be. The real war began 6 months later, with my backyard project. See, I'd always dreamed of building a small wooden deck and a koi pond. Nothing fancy, just a peaceful corner to unwind. I submitted the design to the HOA board for approval, like the rules said. 3 weeks later, they denied it. The reason? Unapproved water features are not permitted as they may attract pests. That would have been fine if it was true. But when I looked around, half the houses on the block had fountains or little bird baths. When I asked about it, Martha said those were grandfathered exceptions. So I decided to build it anyway, within regulation size and with all city permits. I followed every municipal law, every safety guideline. I even consulted a landscaper to make sure it was perfect. 2 days after I started, I got a cease and desist notice taped to my door. Then came a fine, $250 a day, until I restored the yard to its original condition. At first, I thought maybe I could reason with them. I went to the HOA meeting, my first one. The room is full of tired faces and fake smiles. Martha sat at the head of the table like a judge. I explained everything calmly, showed them the city permit, the design plan, the safety report. She didn't even look at them. "It's not about city law," she said coolly. "It's about community standards." That was the moment something broke in me. Because community was supposed to mean people, not power. From that day on, I decided I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to win. But I didn't start by shouting. I started by learning. I read every HOA bylaw, every page of their charter. I spent nights researching how HOAs work, what legal authority they actually have, what limits they can't cross. I spoke to city inspectors, to a lawyer friend, even to a retired HOA board member from another district. And what I found was shocking. Martha had been using outdated rules, ones that had been legally replaced 5 years ago. She'd been collecting fines without formal vote approvals, and worse, she'd been spending association funds without documented consent from the board. This wasn't just about my pond anymore. This was about corruption. So I started collecting evidence, quietly. Screenshots, photos, timestamps, copies of notices, even audio recordings from meetings where she approved things on her own. The more I found, the more I realized half the neighborhood had been paying illegal fines for years. And I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. It started small, whispers between neighbors on morning walks, little nods of courage. Then one night, I invited a few of them over for a barbecue. 10 people showed up. 10 good people who'd been living in fear of one clipboard. We talked for hours, and by the time everyone left, we had a plan. Martha thought she ran the neighborhood. She was about to learn what happens when the neighborhood runs her. The barbecue night changed everything. For months, the whole neighborhood had been walking around with fake smiles and quiet resentment, the kind that builds up until it cracks. But that night, for the first time, people started to speak honestly. There was Tom, who'd been fined for having a non-standard flower color in his garden. Rita, who'd been warned because her elderly mother's wheelchair ramp didn't match the exterior aesthetic. And Miguel, who'd paid over $600 in noise violation fees because his teenage son played guitar after sunset. We weren't a group of rebels. We were just regular homeowners who wanted to live in peace. But we realized we had one thing in common. We were all afraid of one person, Martha Gillian. And that night, fear started turning into something else, strategy. I told everyone what I'd found, about the outdated bylaws, the illegal fines, the financial discrepancies. You could feel the energy shift in the room. For the first time, people weren't defeated. They were angry and ready. "Can we really do something?" Rita asked. I nodded. "Yes, but we have to be smart. She's been running this HOA like a dictatorship. We'll take it back, legally." Tom leaned forward. "How?" "By exposing her, using her own rules. Over the next few weeks, we turned into a quiet resistance. No one confronted Martha directly. That would have been suicide. Instead, we collected information, records, proof. Every notice, every email, every suspicious line in the HOA's monthly budget. I built a spreadsheet of all fines issued in the past 2 years. We compared them to the association's financial reports, which, by law, are supposed to be public to residents. What we discovered made everyone's blood run cold. Tens of thousands of dollars in fines collected, and no record of how most of that money had been spent. Some was listed under vague descriptions like community maintenance or administrative improvements. But when we checked with the maintenance contractors, none of them had received those payments. It didn't take long to see the pattern. Martha had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, luxury furniture, landscaping for her own yard. Even a new fence installed around her property, paid for by everyone else. That's when I knew this wasn't just petty control. It was theft. To build a case, we needed proof that the rest of the board was complicit or clueless. so we started attending HOA meetings, not to argue, but to listen. The meetings were held in the community center every second Thursday. Martha always sat in the middle, flanked by two bored-looking members who rarely spoke. The rest of us sat quietly in the back rows, pretending to be interested while recording everything on our phones. And sure enough, we caught her slipping. One night, when someone asked about the missing landscaping receipts, Martha brushed it off. "The board approved those expenses months ago," she said. Tom asked, "Where's the documentation?" She smiled thinly. "In process." It wasn't in process. It didn't exist. That audio recording would later become Exhibit A. The more evidence we gathered, the bolder we became. We created a private group chat, jokingly called HOA Hunters, where we shared updates. We dug deeper into city records, found the legal precedents for board removals, and even spoke to a pro bono attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases. But Martha started sensing something was off. She noticed the way people stopped greeting her on walks. She noticed how quiet the meetings had become. Too quiet. And she noticed me. One afternoon, I came home to find a new letter taped to my door. Notice of intent to foreclose. My stomach dropped. Apparently, Martha had escalated my unpaid fines. For the koi pond I hadn't even finished building, claiming they now totaled over $6,000, plus interest and administrative costs. And since unpaid fines could lead to a lien, she was initiating foreclosure proceedings. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hand. She wasn't just trying to fine me anymore. She was trying to take my house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just sat on my deck staring at the half-built pond that had started all this. The crickets were the only sound. My kids were asleep, my wife inside. And I realized something. This wasn't about rules or property anymore. It was about power. And she thought she had all of it, but she didn't know what I had. The next morning, I called our lawyer friend, Derek Lowe, the one helping us quietly. When I told him about the foreclosure notice, he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was desperate. "She overplayed her hand," he said. "If she filed this without a board vote, it's illegal, and I can use that to bring her down." That's when the plan shifted from defense to offense. We set up a meeting with the rest of the neighborhood, not in the community center, but in my backyard. Over 30 people showed up, bundled in jackets, holding coffee cups, whispering nervously. I stood on my deck and laid everything out. The fines, the missing money, the illegal foreclosure. And then I showed them something they hadn't seen before. A printed copy of the state law outlining the limits of HOA authority. "Martha's been abusing power for years," I said. "But we have enough evidence to get her removed permanently. We can call for a special election. We can audit the finances. We can end this." At first, people hesitated. Nobody wanted to be the face of rebellion. But when I showed them copies of their own fines, the money she'd stolen from them, hesitation turned to outrage. By the end of that night, every homeowner in the cul-de-sac signed a petition demanding a full financial audit and an emergency election to remove the current board. It was official. The neighborhood was united, and the Queen was surrounded. When Martha got the notice of the petition, her reaction was exactly what I expected: denial and fury. She called an urgent meeting, but this time, almost everyone attended, over 50 residents, some of whom hadn't shown up in years. She walked in wearing her usual confident smile, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. She tried to regain control, slamming her gavel and saying, "This meeting is unauthorized. The petition is invalid." That's when Derek, our lawyer, stepped forward from the crowd. "Actually," he said calmly, "under state law, Section 47.3, homeowners holding over 50% of the votes can call a special meeting. And as of this morning, we have 82%. The room went silent. For the first time, Martha didn't have an answer. She tried to shout, tried to argue, but people started standing up. Rita read out the missing expense records. Miguel played the audio clip of her approving unverified budgets. Tom read the section of the bylaws she'd ignored. Piece by piece, her empire started crumbling right there in front of everyone. When the vote was finally taken, it wasn't even close. 47 votes to 3. Martha Gillian was officially removed as HOA president, effective immediately. She stormed out, muttering about lawsuits and defamation, but we all knew it was over. Or so I thought. Because what happened next proved that when you corner someone who's built their life on control, they don't go down quietly. If I thought removing Martha from the board would end it, I was wrong. People like her don't accept defeat. They live for control. Take it away, and they find new ways to get it back. For about 2 weeks after the vote, everything felt peaceful again. The neighborhood felt alive for the first time. Kids played outside without parents whispering about fines. People started repainting their mailboxes in actual colors, and we all laughed about how scared we'd been of a woman with a clipboard. But then strange things started happening. At first, it was small. My mail began arriving late or not at all. Then the landscaper I'd hired stopped showing up, claiming he'd received anonymous complaints about my property. Next, I woke up one morning to find my tires slashed. All 4 clean cuts. I didn't need a detective to figure out who was behind it. See, Martha might have lost her title, but she hadn't lost her obsession. Rumors started spreading. Whispers that I was misusing HOA funds, that I'd staged everything to take control. Someone even started sending fake HOA notices again, signed acting president. I called a meeting with the new board, people I trusted, and we agreed on one thing. We needed to make this official. If Martha was trying to sabotage us, we'd expose it publicly, once and for all. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, I got a call from the city clerk. "Mr. Ward," she said, "I'm calling regarding a code violation complaint filed against your address. It says you're running an unlicensed construction business out of your garage." I nearly laughed. "That's ridiculous. Who filed it?" She hesitated. "It came from a resident in your HOA community, Mrs. Martha Gillian." Of course. I explained everything to the clerk, who quickly saw through it. But something about the tone of that call set off a light in my head. If she was filing complaints against me, she might be filing them against others too. So, I checked the city's public records. It took me a few days, but what I found made my jaw drop. Over the past 3 months, Martha had filed more than 30 separate complaints against nearly every homeowner who voted her out. Noise violations, illegal constructions, even suspicious activity reports to the local police. She was trying to weaponize the system. That was the final straw. I decided if she wanted a war, she was going to get one. But this time, I wasn't going to fight in the dark. I was going to do it in the open. First, I reached out to every single neighbor who'd been targeted. I told them to document everything. Take photos, keep copies, record calls. We created a shared folder with all the proof. Then, using my engineering background, I compiled a timeline of every one of her actions, from illegal fines to false reports. Next, I contacted a local news reporter who specialized in community corruption stories. I sent her the evidence, every bit of it. She was skeptical at first, until she saw the financial records, the vote transcripts, and the fake notices signed acting president. She agreed to run the story. We didn't tell anyone. 2 weeks later, the report aired under the headline, "HOA President Accused of Harassment and Financial Misconduct. Residents Speak Out." The footage showed interviews with neighbors, my documentation, and side-by-side comparisons of official HOA letters and Martha's forged ones. The story exploded. It hit every local channel within a day. The next morning, Martha's name was trending in the city's Facebook groups. People from nearby neighborhoods shared their own HOA horror stories, calling her Clipboard Queen and the Tyrant of Willow Creek. It was brutal, and it was justice. But while everyone else celebrated, I couldn't relax yet, because I knew Martha, and I knew she wouldn't let it end there. Sure enough, a week later, I got a letter from her lawyer, a defamation lawsuit demanding $250,000 in damages. She claimed I'd orchestrated a smear campaign and emotionally traumatized her. At first, it scared me. I wasn't some legal expert. I was just a guy who wanted a pond in his backyard. But Derek, our attorney, told me not to worry. Let her dig her own hole, he said. She's bluffing. And he was right. When her case went to court, the judge didn't even need an hour. We presented our files, every illegal fine, every fake document, every audio recording. Martha's own emails contradicted her claims. The judge dismissed her lawsuit immediately and referred her actions to the district attorney for potential fraud and harassment charges. When that gavel hit the bench, I swear it sounded like freedom. After that, everything spiraled for Martha. The district attorney launched an official investigation. Turns out, the missing HOA money wasn't just bad bookkeeping. She'd been moving it into her personal account. The total? Nearly $40,000. Her bank statements didn't lie. They froze her assets, revoked her HOA privileges, and within a month, she was facing felony charges. The same woman who once fined me for painting my mailbox the wrong color was now standing in court in front of a judge, answering for crimes far worse than unapproved paint. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to, but I heard she got 2 years probation and was banned from serving on any community board again. The neighborhood celebrated quietly. There were no parties, no signs, just peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need permission or approval. The next spring, I finally finished my koi pond. It was beautiful. Clear water, small bridge, gentle ripples. The same project that had started all this chaos now stood as a reminder of everything we'd fought for. I remember sitting there one evening, watching the reflection of the sunset on the water, when Tom came over with 2 beers. He handed me one and said, "You realize we live in the only HOA-free block in the city now?" I smiled. "Yeah, and we're never going back." He nodded toward the pond. "You ever think it was worth it? Everything that happened?" I looked at the water, calm, unbothered, free, and said, "Every second." But that wasn't quite the end. A few months later, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photo. My house, taken from across the street. On the back, in neat handwriting, it said, "Nice pond." I froze for a second, my heart skipping. But then I laughed, because I realized something. Even if Martha was still watching, it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't in charge. She never would be again. And as I stood there on my deck, the wind rustling through the maples, I felt the kind of satisfaction no amount of revenge could buy. Sometimes justice isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about living free, knowing they can't control you anymore. It's been 2 years since the storm ended. 2 years since the day I stood in that courtroom and watched the judge dismiss her final lawsuit, hammer falling like thunder on everything she'd built from control and fear. 2 years, and sometimes it still feels unreal. I walk through the same streets every morning. The same trees line the road. The same houses stand, quiet and perfect. But everything's different now. Not in the way things look, but in the way they feel. There's laughter again. The sound of kids playing tag down the cul-de-sac doesn't draw disapproving glares anymore. Neighbors greet each other instead of avoiding eye contact. We host barbecues without someone counting how many cars are parked on the curb. It's funny. We didn't realize how much freedom we'd lost until we got it back. The HOA was supposed to make the neighborhood better. And maybe once in some distant ideal world, that's what it did. But here, it became something darker. A cage disguised as order. And the truth is, when people like Martha get a taste of power, they don't protect communities. They feed on them. The first summer after everything ended, we decided to do something symbolic. Instead of the old stiff annual HOA meeting, we hosted what we called Community Day. No rules, no agenda, no votes, just a cookout, some music, kids' games, and laughter. Everyone contributed something small. Food, chairs, decorations, and for once, no one argued about whose lawn was greener. I still remember the feeling when we took the stage, a little makeshift platform we built near the pond. I gave a short speech. Nothing fancy, just honest words. I think we all learned something, I said, looking at the faces of people who had once been afraid to speak. That control isn't the same as care. That rules don't make a home, people do. There was a long silence afterward, the kind that means everyone's thinking the same thing, but no one wants to say it. Then someone started clapping, then another, and soon the whole neighborhood was cheering. It wasn't about me. It wasn't even about what happened. It was about what we'd built after the dust settled, a community, not a collection of properties. That night, as the sun went down, I watched the lights from the party reflect on the pond's surface. Orange, gold, blue. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. Real peace. The kind that's quiet, steady, earned. Of course, not everything was perfect. A few months later, we started getting letters from the city housing department asking if we intended to reinstate a formal management body. Apparently, HOAs, once dissolved, trigger a management gap under municipal law. They wanted to know who was in charge. It took us 3 weeks of paperwork and community meetings to find a solution. Eventually, we formed what we called the Neighborhood Collective, a group with zero legal authority to fine or enforce anything, only to coordinate. We wrote a short charter. No one in this community will ever again be punished for living freely, so long as they respect their neighbors. That was it. 27 words, and it's still taped to the bulletin board by the mailboxes today. Every now and then, someone new moves in, a fresh couple from out of town, or a family looking for a quiet, well-managed community. When they ask about the HOA, the old residents just smile and say, "We don't do that here." They usually look surprised, then relieved. And when they hear the story, because eventually someone always tells it, they're shocked that something so ordinary could have turned into such chaos. But that's the thing about power. It never looks dangerous until someone uses it to hurt you. As for me, I never rebuilt the wall between my property and Martha's old house. The city eventually auctioned it off. She couldn't pay the fines or legal fees. A retired couple bought it. Good people, quiet types. They turned the backyard into a garden and planted cherry trees along the fence line. Sometimes, in the spring, the wind carries the scent of the blossoms over the pond. And every time I smell it, I think about what it took to get here. The sleepless nights, the meetings, the fear, the anger. There's this moment, and maybe it's silly, but it happens every time I sit by the water. The koi swim slowly under the surface, sunlight breaking on their backs, and I realize something. All that chaos, all that struggle, started because of this. A simple pond. Something meant to bring peace ended up uncovering everything wrong beneath the surface. Maybe that's what life does sometimes. Forces the truth out, one broken rule at a time. One afternoon, about a year later, I got a letter in the mail. This time, not anonymous. It was from Martha. Her handwriting was still neat, still controlled, the kind of penmanship that tells you she'd written thousands of official notices in her life. But this one was different. "Ethan," it said, "I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't ask for it. What I did was wrong. I told myself I was protecting order, but the truth is, I was protecting my own fear. Fear of change, fear of losing control. I lost everything because of it. But maybe that's fair. Maybe that's the price people like me have to pay to learn what we should have known all along." I saw the news story about your community day. You looked happy. I hope you stay that way. M. Gillian. I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and never spoke about it again. I didn't hate her anymore. Honestly, I pitied her. Because in the end, her need to control everything had destroyed the one thing she was trying to save: belonging. Sometimes people ask me, online mostly, after that reporter followed up with a documentary, if I do it all again, would I go through the sleepless nights, the legal fights, the public exposure, just to win against one woman and one broken system. And every time I answer the same way, it was never about winning. It was about not surrendering. Because once you let fear dictate your life, once you accept that someone else's clipboard defines your worth, you're already losing. It's not about pawns or paint colors or lawns. It's about freedom, the quiet kind that exists when no one's measuring you. There's one last thing I remember, a scene I'll never forget. The night before the final court decision, I couldn't sleep. The stress, the fear, the what-ifs, they all kept circling in my mind. I went out to the pond just to breathe. It was cold. The air smelled like rain. The water was still. And in that reflection, with the house lights behind me, I saw my own face, tired, older, but proud. Because for once, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't hiding. I was standing. And that's the moment I realized something simple but powerful. Peace isn't given. It's built, sometimes brick by brick, sometimes word by word, but always earned. Now, when people online message me asking for advice about their own HOA nightmares, I tell them this: document everything, speak up, but most importantly, remember why you're fighting. You're not fighting to win a legal case. You're not fighting to humiliate anyone. You're fighting because you deserve to wake up in a place that feels like yours. That's the difference between living in a house and living in a home. So yeah, maybe I went through hell for a pond. Maybe it cost me sleep, money, sanity. But when I stand by that water now, the wind soft, the city quiet, the fish gliding under the lilies, I know it was worth every battle. Because no HOA, no rule book, no signature can ever take away what we built after the fire. A place where people live not under authority, but beside each other. That's what Willow Creek became. And maybe in some strange way, that's what Martha taught us. Not through her power, but through her fall. Sometimes you have to lose control to remember what freedom feels like. This was Ethan Ward, and this is the story of how I took back my neighborhood.